Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So with regards to Ghunnah, Idgham, Ikhfaa and Izhar, it's important to have a few things clarified. So I've written out this table and we're going to go through that inshallah. The first thing is to know what a Ghunnah is. So what is Ghunnah? Ghunnah is the nasal sound that comes out of a person's mouth when they recite the letter Noon and the letter Mim. What do I mean by that? When I say Noon, N, right? That Noon, Mim sound, that nasal sound that comes out of the nose, that's what the Ghunnah is. Now, what is the rule of Ghunnah? The rule of Ghunnah is to elongate or stretch the sound of it by one additional alif, one alif long. So if I was to say the word inna, for example, I'm not going to say inna, I'm going to say inna. So I extend that, right? I make it a little bit longer, inna, right? Instead of just saying inna, which would just be the normal sound that you would have with a noon. Okay, and then I say when. When is Ghunnah done? Ghunnah is, you're only going to check for Ghunnah or look for if a word has Ghunnah in it, or if you're going to do Ghunnah, which means to make this sound and follow the rule. You're only going to check when it comes to a noon sakin and a mim sakin, right? And some people added a tanween to this, but in reality, tanween is actually just noon sakin. Why? Because if I was to say the word fathan with a tanween, right? That in, that's what tanween is, right? So if I was to say fathan, and if I was to write that same exact word out in a different way, where the pronunciation is the exact same, right? These two are the exact same. You say fathan and fathan. There's no difference between the two. In reality, this one on the left, on the right over here, with the noon sakin is what that tanween represents, okay? So in reality, tanween is just a noon sakin. That's all a tanween is. So it goes back to the the origin, which is noon sakin or mim sakin. So when is Ghunnah? When do you look for Ghunnah? When you see a noon sakin or a mim sakin, or when you see a tanween. Okay. Now, two things I want to clarify is what sound and placement means. Sound is the Ghunnah. So that when I say sound, right, we're going to talk about that down here during these rules. When I say the word sound, I'm referring to Ghunnah. I'm referring to that nasal sound that comes out. Are you going to, do that nasal sound with its rule of elongating it by one alif? Okay, that's what sound refers to. And when I say placement, I'm referring to the actual placement of the tongue. So for mim, the placement of the tongue and the lips is to close your lips together to get that mim sound, right? And for the noon, it's to put your tongue behind the top two teeth, right, where the gums are of the top two teeth. You'd say noon, and the other one is mim. So that's the placement of your tongue and your lips with regards to the noon and the mim. That's why I wrote here origin of the letter, and sound refers to Ghunnah. So when I say you are going to do Ghunnah, it means you're going to take out this nasal sound, right? That sound, and you're going to elongate it one alif long. That's what doing Ghunnah means. Okay? Now, what I said was, when do you look for Ghunnah? When you see a noon sakin or a mim sakin. So let's take an example. If I was to give you the word from Surah Fatiha, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta. You're looking at this word and you see, okay, look, there's an alif, there's a noon, ayn. Oh wait, there's a noon. That noon has a sukoon on it, right? You see that noon sakin? That's immediately when you should start looking for a Ghunnah. Now, we know that Ghunnah is, what is doing Ghunnah? Ghunnah is to make that nasal sound. So the first question that comes to a person's mind, that should come to a person's mind, when they see a noon sakin or a mim sakin, is to automatically say, okay, am I doing Ghunnah here or not? Am I going to do Ghunnah? In other words, am I going to make this a sound and elongate it for one alif, or I'm not going to do that? That's the first question. In order to figure the answer out to that question, the answer is going to come based off of the letter that comes immediately after that noon sakin or the mim sakin. And that's what tells you, that's where this placement of Idgham, Ikhfaa, and Izhar is. So now, as for Idgham, and these are the rules of it, right? What I have in the second part are the rules of Idgham, Izhar, and Ikhfaa. But as for what Idgham is to join two letters together. In other words, to join two letters together to where the first one, you no longer pronounce it anymore. The letters of idgham are ya, waw, mim, and noon. These are the four letters of idgham, which means that if any one of these letters occurs after a noon sakin, right? So I'm going to write the example over here. If I said man yu'minu, right? Man yu'minu. You look at the noon sakin, and immediately afterwards is a ya. So you say, oh wait, ya is one of the letters of idgham, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to join these two together. That's what idgham means. Idgham means to join the two letters together. So you see noon sakin, you say afterwards is one of the letters of idgham. So I'm going to do idgham, which means I'm going to join these two letters together. And what's the ruling in joining two letters together? This is the ruling right over here. Sound, not placement. In other words, you're going to make the sound. Remember I said sound means ghunnah. You're going to take the sound of ghunnah, but you're not going to do the placement of the noon. Okay? That's the rule of idgham. Idgham is to take out the sound of ghunnah, but not to pronounce the origin of the letter. So in man yu'minu, you don't hear the reciter say man yu'minu, man yu'minu. They completely do not pronounce that noon, but they show that the noon does exist by pronouncing its sound. So what is the sound of noon? The sound of noon is the ghunnah. And that's why we say man yu'minu. So we still take out that nasal sound, but we don't pronounce the letter. Okay? So you completely, it's as if there's no noon here, but because there is a noon in real life, right? Because there is that noon, we show that noon by its sound and not by its placement. Okay? That's what idgham is. To join the two letters together to where the noon sakin is no longer, the placement of the noon sakin is no longer there, but the sound is there. The sound meaning that nasal ghunnah sound elongated for one letter. So you say man yu'minu, and the same thing with a waw, a mim, and a noon. That's the letters of idgham. As for, we're going to skip ikhfa for now, and we're going to go to izhar. As for izhar, you have 6 letters. You have hamza, you have ha, you have ayn, ha, ghayn, and kha. And you can kind of remember it like this: hamza, ha, ayn, ha, ghayn, kha. And just repeat that a few times, you'll memorize it. Okay? So an easy example of one of these, right? If I was to, I'll write the example down here. If I was to give the example of Surah Fatiha, I would say اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. So أنعمت, right? You'd see this. You say, okay, look, there's a noon sakin, right? Immediately after that, because the job to figure this out is to look at the noon sakin and what comes after it. What comes after that? Ayn. Ayn comes after that. You say, okay, well, I memorized the letters of idgham, and the letters of idgham are only 4, and ayn is not one of them. Okay, I also memorized the letters of izhar. There's 6, and ayn is one of them. So I'm going to apply the ruling of izhar. What is the ruling of izhar? Placement and not sound. What does that mean? You're going to show the placement of the noon, right? Means you're going to show the origin. You're going to say noon, right? An'amta, you pronounce it. Whereas, remember the first one we said man yu'minu, you're not pronouncing the noon, right? But in this one, you're going to pronounce the noon. You're going to say an'amta, and you're not going to come out with that sound. What sound? Ghunnah. So in izhar, there is no ghunnah. Okay, that's the ruling of izhar. In izhar, there is absolutely no ghunnah. You're not going to pronounce that nasal sound or elongate it for one thing. You're not going to be saying an'amta, right? You don't elongate it. You don't do that ghunnah, an'amta. You don't do any of that. So you're only pronouncing the letter itself and you're not doing the ghunnah. Okay, that's an example of izhar. Now, what is besides idgham and izhar is ikhfaa. Ikhfaa is every other letter. So you don't have to memorize every other letter, but every other letter that's not the letters of idgham, right, or not the letters of izhar, is going to be the letters of ikhfaa. What is the ruling of ikhfaa? Ikhfaa is, and I wrote this in the middle for a reason, idgham means completely get rid of that noon, right? You find the noon sakin in the sentence, in the word. Idgham is to completely get rid of this noon. We don't want to see that noon anywhere in idgham. Okay? The only thing you're doing in idgham is pronouncing the sound, that ghunnah, that sound, that nasal sound that comes from the noon. That's the only thing you're pronouncing. But as for the actual letter, you don't pronounce that in idgham. In izhar, you're not going to show any of the ghunnah, right? It's the complete opposite. It's the exact opposite of in idgham, right? In idgham, you're showing the ghunnah, not showing the letter. In izhar, you are showing the letter and you're not showing the ghunnah, which is like what I said in an'amta. You're showing the actual letter, you're not showing the ghunnah. What's in between these two is when you show half of the letter, right? So you're not hiding it fully, as would be the case in idgham, but you're not showing the letter fully, as would be the case in izhar. It's like a stage between those two. That's what ikhfa is. So ikhfa, how to pronounce, if I was to give an example of letters that are besides the letters of idgham and izhar, I could say min sharril waswasil khannas. I said min sharri, right? This is a nun sakin. You say, okay, cool, nun sakin. What's after that? Sheen. Sheen is neither any of the letters of idgham, nor is it the letters of izhar. So you know that you're going to automatically be doing ikhfa. So what is ikhfa? Ikhfa is that middle stage between the two, meaning you're going to show some of the actual noon, right? Showing the full noon would be min sharri, you show the entire noon. And completely getting rid of it would be mish sharri, right? You don't even bring the noon there. And between the two would be min sharri. It's like you almost say the noon, but you don't. And whilst almost doing that, you bring out the sound, meaning the ghunnah. Okay? So when is ghunnah, that sound made? That sound is made during idgham, it's made during ikhfa, and it's not made during izhar. When is the placement made? The placement is fully made in izhar, it's partially made in ikhfa, and it is not made in idgham. Placement meaning showing the actual noon. Okay, and to finish this off, we're going to, I said over here you have noon, right? Noon is one of those letters. So I can do idgham of noon. I could say min, no min. Do you do ghunnah or you don't do ghunnah? First thing you're going to do is say, okay, well, look, there's a noon sakin. After that noon sakin, the first letter is a noon. You say, okay, the letters of idgham are ya, waw, mim, and noon. So this is one of the letters of idgham. And what's the ruling in idgham? The ruling in idgham is to get rid of the first letter, but keep the ghunnah, that sound, that nasal sound of the first letter. It's going to be as if you're reciting this word right here. If I was to ask you to recite that, you would say min naum wa amanahum min khawf. If I was to say min khawf, the first thing you're going to do is, okay, I see a noon sakin. Am I going to do ghunnah or not? Well, in order to figure that out, I'm going to look at the letter that comes after it. Is the letter that comes after it one of the letters of idgham? You say, no, it's not. Right? This is a kha, right? So you say hamza ha, ayn ha, ghayn kha. That's one of the letters of izhar. So you say that I'm going to do izhar over here. So what is izhar again? Izhar is to recite the noon, right? To recite the noon and to not do any ghunnah. So there's no ghunnah in izhar and you just recite this normally. So it would just be min khawf wa amanahum min khawf, right? You're not going to do, there's no ghunnah there. You just recite that noon. As for ikhfa, we could say, for example, Allah says, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ. You say, oh, there's a noon sakin. Am I doing ghunnah here or not? How do I figure that out? By looking at the letter that comes right afterwards. That letter is a sin. You say letters of idgham are ya, waw, mim, noon. So it's not idgham. Letters of izhar are hamza ha, ayn ha, ghayn kha. So it's not that. This is sin. Anything that's besides those two categories, you say, okay, automatically I know that the ruling is now going to be ikhfa, which means what? The ruling of ikhfa is to you have some of the placement with the sound. In other words, I'm not going to pronounce this noon entirely by saying insan, but I'm not going to completely get rid of it by saying isan. I'm going to say, stay kind of in between insan. And then with that, I'm going to bring out that Ghunnah sound, which extends for one alif long. So I'm going to say insan, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ, right? And so that should, clarify the idea of Ghunnah, Idgham, Ikhfaa, and Izhar.